at your service, sweet thing.
Well, if it isn't King Farouk and his bevy of beauties. Have you seen my tax man?
You don't need no taxi. Where to?
Well, Arenas, now that you mention it.
Hey, well, that's all right. You gonna check out some fine leathers and stuff?
Fans, I hate to tell you this, but some of us do work once in a while.
Why?
Well, welfare is just not my style.
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Movie Oblivion, the podcast about feature films based on comic books and comic strips that people have stopped talking about. I'm your host, Kumar. My co-host is Jordan.
Hello.
Hi, Jordan. Do you mind being called co-host?
Absolutely not.
Cool.
It's very flattering.
Okay, cool. Because part of the show is I'm going to be imposing these movies on you and making you watch them. This is our premiere episode. We're going to be talking about Friday Foster from 1975, starring Pam Grier. But before we get to that, we're going to have a little preamble because this is our inaugural episode about how this show came about. So, really, it started a year ago when I watched the Robert Altman Popeye movie and was thinking, oh, we could do this as an episode of Deconstructing Comics, which is our sister podcast, mother podcast. And
Primordial podcast?
Yeah, and then it was like, oh, it's too much work. There's so much Thimble Theater, Popeye comic strips to read and this, and is there time to do it? But I thought it's kind of a shame that nobody's kind of doing a comic strip to movie comparison of these things, because that movie was actually a little bit closer to the comic strips than the cartoons, I felt. And then, so then I kind of let the idea sleep. I kind of made up a list of possible movies to talk about, like movies that are not the Marvel movies, because I just think there's lots of podcasts about those. I was even listening to one about people that had never seen any Marvel movies, and it was like them going through them all, and I was like, there's so many takes on this,
every possible iteration. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, we might as well get that out the road. We're not going to talk about Marvel movies.
We're gonna
pretty much ever, not the current iteration of Marvel movies anyway.
Right. And there might be a podcast like this out there, I don't know, but I was like,
if there is, we're better. Sorry,
yeah. Yeah, out of the gate with no, first episode, we're already better than those shows. So yeah, it was just like nobody's kind of talking about this side of comic book adaptations. Whenever people think of them now, I mean, there was like last year or the year before we had Bloodshot with Vin Diesel, and it's like that's the kind of comic book movie adaptation that people are talking about. Even if it's not the Marvel one, it's kind of in that.
The kind where people don't know they're based on comic books.
Yes, exactly. That's why we went with the title Oblivion, because it's like out of consciousness. It's no longer in the conversation to some degree, either the comic or the movie. To some degree, it's been forgotten, and it's
absolutely.
Not.
This is the type of high concept academic discourse that you can expect from this podcast. Yeah.
And okay, so then a year later, after I was kind of stewing over the idea, wasn't sure. Then I heard about this movie, this blaxploitation movie from 1975, starring Pam Grier, called Friday Foster. I think it was in some Facebook group. I don't remember what it was about. But then somebody actually commented in this description of this movie that it was based on a comic strip. And I'm like, okay, wait a second. I've never heard of this movie, and I've never heard of this comic strip. So I thought that was the moment that I decided we've got to do this. And the other thing was that I really like recording podcasts about comics. For me, it's a chance to talk about comics. But preparing a Deconstructing Comics episode takes like 5 weeks, because it's like, okay, I'm going to read all 50 issues of Doom Patrol or whatever series this is before I talk about it, and it takes forever to prep. And I thought, how can I do this in a way that's quick and easy? And how we're going to do it, the plan is, the format is going to be, we're going to watch the movie. The requirement of preparation is to watch the movie and then read about 50 pages or as much as you want of the comic, like a minimum, like one issue or 2 issues worth.
Yep. Kumar promised me 3 hours and under prep a week.
Yes.
And I plan to hold him to.
Yeah, that is the plan. So that leads to the next thing, which was selection. How do we choose which adaptations we're going to cover? And it also, in the title of the log line for the show, I call it feature films based on comic books. So it's not going to be any TV shows. Now, we talked about this. You asked me about this a couple of weeks ago. You said, are we going to do TV shows? And I'm like, well, okay, like if we do, say, The Flash, which I've seen all of, or most of, that's like 7 seasons. How are we going to choose which sections of it we're going to watch? You know, how is there any... Now, this show's not going to be fair about these things in any way, I don't think, because we're only reading about 30 pages of comics. But there's no way to be fair to a show that's been running 4 seasons or 5 seasons or something, and a lot of them are on Netflix. And I maybe we'll talk about this later or whatever. I don't watch a lot of Netflix. I find it very samey. It's not interesting to me. And part of this show was I wanted to stick to things that would be I just thought looked interesting or I heard were interesting, and that's part of the reason why the Marvel movies aren't in there. I mean, I've seen almost all of them, but I don't really care to talk about them.
Sure.
You know.
Sure.
All right. So, what else was there in the selection part? Okay, so we're not doing any TV series. We might maybe touch on a few that seem like super interesting or something. But on the other hand, it was like, when you said, are we going to do TV series, the first thing I thought of was like Sabrina the Teenage Witch. And I'm like, okay, even if there was only 6 episodes of that.
That's not the first thing I thought of.
Yeah, even if we only did, like, I don't know how many seasons that show ran for, but I'm like, I don't really want to, I kind of seen it when I was flipping through channels, but I'm like, I really don't, I'm not too keen on talking about this and reading a bunch of Sabrina comics. I mean, I read some Sabrina comics, but it's like, I don't know if I want to squeeze a half hour out of this, or... So it was kind of an easy way to just block some stuff off. And what I did was I went onto IMDb, and I looked at a list of about... And I entered in the search, like, based on comic... You have to do 3 different searches: based on comic book, based on comic strip. All 3 lists are not the same because people just add those tags themselves, I guess.
Sure.
And it came up with like 1,500 or 2,500 things, and I was like, oh my god, okay, so how do we cut this down? So another thing I've cut out is, it's similar to TV series. I've cut out the movie serials from the like 40s and 30s and 50s. Because it's like a 4-hour Dick Tracy serial is, to me, as much work as watching a TV show. And it might not be fair. There might be some great stuff in there, like the old like Flash Gordon serials. All that kind of stuff might be great, but it's like 6 hours.
Yes.
So I'm like, okay, I cut those out.
Is there a date? Is there a hard cutoff date, or is it?
No, absolutely not. I'm definitely, because I think the earliest stuff I've got on there is like the Blondie movies from like the 30s, I want to say. Or there's some super early stuff on there. I can't remember all of it. I'll have to pull up the list again. Right. So there is stuff, but only if it's within like the feature film cutoff, like that length. If it's like 2 hours.
Yes, gotcha.
Yeah. There was a lot of there's a lot, for some reason there's a lot of Filipino ones. Like for some reason the Philippines had a lot of comic strips, it seems like, and they made a lot of movies. I don't know about a lot, like 10, 15 I pulled up on this. I was like, kind of cut those out.
Okay.
There's going to be some Japanese stuff on here eventually, but not a lot, because a lot of it does get adapted from manga. A lot of those manga aren't available in English. And even if we can get the movies, a lot of them are kind of budget productions that I just thought, much like Sabrina, I was like, am I going to have fun watching this? And I could kind of get it sense early on it's like maybe it's not going to be that interesting to watch because it's just a really low budget. Yeah.
Rule of thumb is going to govern a lot of your choices for this podcast. So if people are expecting, you've made a good case for how you've been consistent, but I might point out that if you are hoping for some sort of intellectual consistency, we're probably not going to get it.
No, because eventually we will.
It's going to be very organic.
Eventually we will maybe do a couple of episodes of some TV show, or maybe we will do one of those serials eventually. Like maybe someday we are going to talk about the Warren Beatty Dick Tracy movie. Maybe that will be after that. We'll be like, actually, let's go back and watch that 4-hour serial from the 1940s. So it's not really written in stone. Like another one is I've decided on minimal animation because again that opens up. For two reasons. One is it opens up a whole again with the anime. So much anime is based on manga, and it would just be like too much. There's just too much material. But there are a few things. Like eventually we're gonna get to heavy metal. We're gonna get to Fritz the Cat. A few things like that in there. 'Cause I just thought. But another thing is, I'm more interested in why. Sometimes you read a comic and the art is so awesome, and it boggles the mind to think somebody would make a live-action adaptation of it. Like the awesome thing about this is the artwork. Like what was the thinking? Was it Elvis Costello who said that like writing about music is like dancing about architecture? And I sometimes I feel like. A live-action adaptation of a comic is great. Now, not so much in the last 5 years because a lot of comics are being written as pitches for movies. But before that, certainly it'd be like, why did you what made the producer think we should make a movie version of this? So my feeling is animation is a bit closer. You can adapt the style, the visual style of the comic a lot closer. So it's almost there's an element taken out of the discussion to a certain degree.
Good.
So
no, that's fine.
So it's like, well, there's one thing less to talk about maybe with an animated version. So I thought, well, maybe we'll limit those. So I cut all those out of the list.
Yeah. Good. No, that's excellent. If we do one, will you be sure that we'll make a case for it?
Yeah.
At the beginning, that why it needs to be spoken about.
Yeah.
Why we've made an exception to that rule of thumb.
Yeah. The other things nothing direct to video. Done very little of that. Again, just because of I just don't want to watch something that's...
So it has to have been shown in a theater, okay?
Yeah, I just don't want it to be too crud. Like because of budget limitations, you know what I mean? I want to see like an effort to actually... how am I trying to put this? To make a big movie that would make money instead of something that would end up direct. The other thing is we're only going to do... my hope is to only do one. If a movie has had a bunch of sequels, only do one, and don't do all the sequels, and not even necessarily the first one. Like, for example, Hellboy. I haven't seen the second one, so my choice for an episode would be the second Hellboy movie, and not the first one or the reboot, quote unquote, from a few years ago.
Gotcha.
But I wouldn't necessarily do both of them, and I can't think of any. Well, Superman 3 and 4 I think are both worthy of being covered. I don't think I'll cover 1 and 2 because I think those are being talked about a lot on other shows.
Okay.
Okay. Does that make? Okay, any questions?
It does. No, you see,
we had this conversation. We kind of had this conversation we had this conversation face to face kind of a few weeks ago. Where you're like, are we going to do this or that or whatever? All right. So as I said, I'm going to impose all of this on you. I'm going to make you watch some real crap over the course of this series. But by the way, the list eventually I cut it down to about 250 movies. And I don't know how many. Yeah, I don't know how many of those are really fully available or not, like how hard it's going to be to find some of them, or either the movie or the comics based on, because that's kind of the point of the show, is some of these are a bit obscure. So if we do this weekly, that's like 5 years of content, possibly.
Oh wow, gee, that's A 5-year sentence.
It might be like that. Okay, but we might have to give up. It might be so crap we might have to give up at a certain stage, because up to a certain point in time, especially through the 90s, especially after Batman 89, it was like comic book movies were like video game movies are still, like really dire. So there's definitely a big chunk of stuff that's not good. Although that's true of maybe any genre of movie, not just those based on comic books and comic strips. But okay, did you have any questions? You want to pick my brain about my thoughts about any of this?
No, that's been quite comprehensive. I'm pleased to be learning the rules of the podcast that I agreed to do as I begin doing it. No, that's fine. No, I think this is going to be a lot of fun. I doubt we probably don't have any listeners that haven't heard us on Deconstructing Comics, but I've been recording episodes of Deconstructing Comics with Kumar for a couple of years now, and I think we've got a good dynamic. I enjoy it very much. Kumar and I, of course, are friends in real life and enjoy one another's company, I hope. So I'm really looking forward to doing this with you, Kumar, for 5 years or even longer. Yeah.
Well, like I said, if we end up deciding to go into the TV and stuff, it could really stretch out. But
it depends on consumer demand. If the listeners want it, I'm assuming we're going to have
true too. Yeah,
so many listeners, and if the listeners want it, then by golly, we'll do it.
I recorded one episode of Deconstructing Comics, and I mentioned the number of listeners I thought we had. For some reason, it came up in the show, and I said, "Oh, we've only got X number of listeners."
Right.
And Tim Young, the producer of Deconstructing Comics and the Overlord, bleeped it. And he said it was actually a podcasting faux pas of some sort to mention the number of listeners you've got. I guess it's like talking about your salary or something.
Okay. Well, I dare say, right?
I don't know, but you're not supposed to anyway.
It's like mentioning the name of the Scottish play. We just don't do it.
Yeah, but I was just like, oh, we're recording this. It's our first episode, and the number is 0. I'm going to say it out loud. Yeah. It's not going to be bleeped.
No! Oh, my God!
But I do wonder if anybody will come back and listen from the beginning at some stage, or, anyway.
I'm not sure, but if they've made it through, how long has it been already? I mean, it's been about 15. If they've made it through this 15 minutes, they're presumably stayers.
I thought you were going to say half an hour. I was like,
they'll be in it for the long haul.
Yeah. Okay. I think if there are no more questions from the floor, we'll get into it.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Okay. So as I said, we're talking about Friday Foster, which was a comic strip that ran from 1970 to 1974. Yes. Written by Jim Lawrence, drawn by Jorge Longarón, who's a Spanish artist. Apparently the first Spanish artist to ever draw a syndicated U.S. newspaper strip.
Right.
So, as I said, this is a strip I'd never heard of before. They're basically two white guys, but Lawrence had... they were allies, let's say. Lawrence saw the lack of diversity in the strips, and I think he did something that was kind of a prototype of this as early as like 68 or 69 or something like that, which didn't launch, but it was, I guess, a little bit similar. But basically it's a strip about a photographer. She's like a fashion photographer named Friday Foster. And she's from Harlem. She lives there alone with her kid brother. And she ends up in the employ of this other fashion photographer, this white guy, through some various shenanigans, she ends up working for
Yeah.
him.
The subject of the first series.
That's right. Yeah, the first I guess continuity we would call it in a newspaper strip. So anyway, so it's like mostly, it's really quite interesting. It's mostly a black cast, and it was reprinted. A bunch of all of the Sunday strips were reprinted, not the dailies, but the Sundays were reprinted in a book published by Ablaze, a publisher I'd never heard of, Ablaze Publishing, which just came out last year.
Yes.
Surprisingly, and it is a huge book. It's 300 pages, and it's got, as I said, all the Sundays, and it's quite. It's really good for a strip collection because it's got all sorts of extras in there. It's got interviews with Lawrence's kids. It's got like...
That's the writer, yep.
Yeah, and it's got interview with Longarón from before he passed away, he passed away during production of the book, but they had an old interview with him. They've got all sorts of like newspaper advertisements and like promotional material and press releases that ran at the time that it was launched. And then they've got all sorts of stuff about the movie too. They've got an interview with Arthur Marks, the director, and they've got an interview with Pam Grier, which to me was like my favorite part of the book. I thought it was a really cool, fun interview. They've got lots of like the color guides, like draft versions of strips and stuff. It's amazing. I think after Longarón died, they mentioned that like his family went through his archives and like found a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
So, really overall, a very impressive collection.
Yeah, I agree. I really enjoyed reading it. It was very comprehensive. A lot of material.
Yeah, and they've recolored the strips because the way they were working, they didn't have the originals. They had like newspapers, like printed newspapers from 70 to 74. Colors had degraded.
Yes, it was the Chicago Tribune, I think.
The Chicago Tribune was the syndicator, yeah, for sure, was the
syndicator.
Yeah.
And they hadn't kept the originals.
They hadn't kept the originals, and I think at the end it was only running in like L.A., Los Angeles Times maybe or something at the very end. I thought I wrote it down, maybe I didn't. Anyway, I thought I had not heard of this at all, but actually I kind of had a little smidgen of it, which is that also included is some material about some novels James Lawrence wrote, Jim Lawrence writing as James Lawrence, called Dark Angel. He wrote a series of 4 men's adventure novels called Dark Angel about a black PI, and those covers were done also by Longarón. He painted those covers. Now, I actually own some of those books. And I haven't read them. And I didn't put it together. But the thing was, when I was writing my own men's adventure novel a few years ago, I was reading, especially I was researching and stuff. But especially if they featured kind of like, let's say, like an ethnic lead, I sometimes bought those books. Those Dark Angel books are very hard to find. But I bought some of those. I bought some Black Samurai. And I haven't read them, but I did listen to a review of one of them on the Paperback Warrior podcast a few months ago, and they really didn't like them. But it's interesting. I don't remember them mentioning that Lawrence had written this comic strip before. Now, Lawrence had a varied career.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, he had a varied career as he wrote movies and radio dramas and all sorts of stuff, apparently. It's almost impossible to keep track of. And he'd written these novels, and those novels were reviewed, but apparently Friday Foster was so forgotten that as I recall, those guys didn't even mention the strip. So I still thought, when I came across this, I was like, I don't know what this is. Until I flipped to those pages with the Dark Angel covers, I was like, oh my god, I know this guy.
Yeah. Well, it mentions in the text that I'm not sure if Lawrence considered Friday Foster to be his best work, but he was attached to it, and they hint in the book that the Dark Angel novels was a way for Lawrence to continue writing about
Right.
a Friday Foster or a Friday Foster-like character
Right.
in the 1980s.
Right.
So there's a direct connection there, not just that she's a kind of a dashing secret agent and a woman of color, but a direct link to his earlier work on Friday Foster.
Yeah.
So what a coincidence that you own those books. So there's a genuine link right there between you, Friday Foster and Jim Lawrence reaching across the ether. That certainly makes that's very serendipitous. It's an excellent auspicious beginning.
It is, but I think it's interesting. I think when he was writing those Dark Angel books, I think there's something very different, because Friday Foster, when I came in, I heard there was a Pam Grier blaxploitation movie. I was like, okay, this is going to be an awesome comic strip. And you come into it, and it's really like, I read 2 or 3 continuities into it, I think, 2 or 3 storylines. And it's really it's like Mary Worth or Rex Morgan MD. I was expecting like a lot of kind of, maybe somehow she would end up with some espionage or gun action, especially based on the existence of Dark Angel and based on this being a Pam Grier movie. It's like, okay, there's going to be a lot of gunfights and chasing people around, and it's going to be but actually it's really tame kind of soap opera storylines.
Yes,
and
it's quite Hardy Boys, isn't it? I mean, it was published in newspapers on Sundays. Wasn't it, where anyone could.
Yeah, and in fact, there's a section in there about how when the white photographer shows up in Harlem for the first time, he's kind of hassled by these thugs carrying knives, and they had to erase the knives, so you can't even tell what's going on in this. You don't understand what the hell's going on. He's just being badmouthed by some kids that come up to him on the street.
He's holding his hand out.
Yeah, he's holding his hand out, and you're like,
because he's supposed to have a knife in it.
Yeah,
it's supposed to be a menacing scene, but they edited it out. So it's quite tame, isn't it?
It is.
But that's not.
Yeah.
I mean, as you said, it was written and drawn by 2 white guys, although one's Spanish and one's kind of like an interesting character with many credits and quite a colorful personal history. But it's transgressive in the sense, I suppose. I mean, Friday Foster was the first, nationally syndicated comic strip series with a black protagonist.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So there had been one before, but it was in a magazine or newspaper specifically for black consumption.
That's right.
And this was the one that was nationally syndicated and could be read in a magazine that was generally available.
Yeah, and they talk about how as soon as some papers got it, they dropped it once they realized what was going on. Like,
right, because it was black and white.
Southern papers, yeah.
The Southern papers. Correct. I'd forgotten that. Yeah.
That's interesting too. So, like, as mild as the stories are, the art by Longarón is awesome, and he has a kind of style similar to, I'd say, like Jim Holdaway's Modesty Blaze comic strips. It's like a really detailed, it's a very Euro style, and I think if an American artist had drawn this strip, and at the end Gray Morrow, who is like a major comic strip artist, both takes over the last few strips once Longarón quits, but it would have been drawn like an American comic artist, I guess, would have drawn the way they saw black people drawn in comic books, instead of drawing like actual people, if you know what I mean. I feel like he's drawing real, like he's modeled on, like there's nothing caricaturish about the people. They look like they have really natural faces.
Like people. They have very natural features. It's really quite nice art, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, if anyone's not already interested in this comic, I mean, you should try and get this book, the Friday Foster the Sunday Strips, published 2021. It's really interesting. I really enjoyed reading it. I can thoroughly recommend it.
And I think that there's also, there's some people that run a museum at the end of Black History or something, I can't remember, but they mentioned the costumes, that why were these 2 white guys, there's a lot of attention on the costumes and the fashion. And
yes,
it's really fascinating to me. Those are kind of the art-wise. I think the art was really great for those reasons. I like the almost photorealistic style of it, and I loved the drawings of Harlem are really. They're really done lovingly. Like there's a real attention to detail, there's real realism to it. All the street scenes look really great.
Yes, it feels lived in. It doesn't feel like a critique. Doesn't seem dystopic. It's people. I mean, it's clearly Harlem. It wasn't a nice neighborhood in the 1970s, but it looks lived in. It looks real, and it's, as you say, it's done with sincerity. That'll be a word that we'll probably be using a lot. Sincerity. It's done with sincerity and care.
Yeah, and it seems like he went to visit Harlem to do research.
He did indeed.
And he talks about how they were kind of getting some.
They both went.
Hostile looks. Yeah, they both went. That's right. Yeah. They were getting some hostile looks while he was driving around taking pictures, and that scene is almost.
That's
played out exactly
what inspired the scene with the knife that got edited out.
Yes. Yeah.
Because they were confronted for taking pictures without permission.
Yeah. So I love that kind of aspect of it, but really, I could only read maybe 50 pages of it.
Yeah, I would agree. It's very interesting as a piece of history. The art's beautiful. The stories, it's like boilerplate, isn't it? I mean, this guy Jim Lawrence, he wrote a story every week.
Well, yeah, and it's imagine if we had to read the dailies as well, because the dailies are comic strip writing is a very weird thing.
The Sunday.
Yeah, because in comic strips you have 4 panels, maybe 3. In the first panel you have to recap what happened yesterday, and then in panel 4 you have to kind of have a cliffhanger for tomorrow, and it's just this kind of weird rhythm that you get into where you drag things out like a daily soap opera. It's like Days of Our Lives. Every day you got to stretch this stuff out. So you got 5 days.
It's very much like a soap opera. No serial. I'm not sure if serial is the correct word. None of those sequence stories ever really has a proper beginning or a proper end, because they will end with the setup for the next story, the cliffhanger for the next story. So
yes, that's right too.
It will just have been resolved. The story will just have been resolved, and a character will wander in off panel from the right and say, "Aha! It's Friday Foster. I'll have to go and talk to her about that matter."
Yes, right.
And then that'll run into the next story.
Right, and that's exactly and that's exactly the way like Mary Worth or Rex Morgan MD would work as well. It was the same. That's kind of your format for your daily or Sunday or weekly comic strip. But even though I read 50 pages, kind of, okay, I've kind of seen enough, and then I definitely flipped through the rest of it, because it's still it was still a joy to look at throughout.
And it's not to say it was, according to the book, it was quite popular in its day.
Yeah. Especially
among the black community, apparently.
Yeah.
And even Tom Jones liked it.
Yes,
because that, I dare say, it's the second story about the Welsh singer wearing a ridiculous outfit.
Yeah,
it looks like Austin Powers.
Yeah,
he looks like Austin Powers,
and he sounds like Austin Powers.
He does sound like Austin Powers. Apparently it was an affectation of Lawrence's to put this English dialogue in his work.
Right.
Apparently, but yeah, he looks and sounds like Austin Powers. It's quite remarkable, and Tom Jones liked it, and he owns the originals for that strip.
Yeah.
So that's where at least one of the originals ended up in the hands of Tom Jones.
Yeah. Okay, so the strip runs from 70 to 74. Somehow after its death, a year later, we get Friday Foster the movie.
Yeah.
So directed by Arthur Marks, written by someone named Orville Hampton. Arthur Marks had directed 1 or 2 other blaxploitation movies around this time. So 75. So we've got, I think, Coffee was 73. Foxy Brown was 74. So Pam Grier is at the absolute height of her powers.
Yeah. Well, you can see the promotional material literally says "Wham Bam, here comes Pam."
Oh yeah. That's what everybody's paying their ticket money for, is for Pam Grier.
To see Pam Grier. Absolutely.
Yeah. She's actually peak Pam Grier. So so usually whenever I do a podcast deconstructing comics, I avoid talking about it with the co-host during the week. We ended up,
which we've done. Yep. No, okay, sorry, go on.
We had a word or two about this movie, and because you mentioned you were watching the movie. I think you sent me a screenshot or a bit of video or something, and I was both. I could not resist blurting that I loved this movie. I totally loved it, right from the opening, right out of the gates. When the whole opening credit sequence, I really loved. And it's okay. So she has a great interview at the back of this book, as I mentioned, where she talks about how it was. She describes it as a family movie.
Yes.
I don't know what Pam Grier's family is like, but this movie, I guess it's a bit tame compared to other blaxploitation movies of the time, but it's still full of
I've got words to say about that.
Naked Pam, lots of gun violence. It actually had
car chases, so many car chases.
We got a pimp with hookers.
Yep.
As a major character, and actually, it had all the stuff in it that I wanted in the comic strip.
I've got things. Yeah, that's what you thought you were getting with the comic strip, right? No, so I did. I don't know if you did this, but this is certainly what I did. I read the comic. Oh, you did. You read the comic first.
Yeah.
You read the book first. I read the comic and the book. Friday's Foster, as she's having fairly mild adventures.
Yeah.
Certainly not a lot of gun violence, or certainly no naked breasts or pimps.
Yeah.
But and I read, of course, Pam Grier's interview where she talks very fondly about it and mentions how much more wholesome she considered it than some of the other films that she did. And also the interview with Arthur Marks, the director, where he flat out states, I didn't consider it a blaxploitation movie.
Right.
I just considered it a movie about a comic that I heard people talking about when I was in a drugstore once. So I thought, oh, okay. All right, that's fine. And you see, at that point in my life, I had never seen a blaxploitation movie.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay, so I have now. I mean, it doesn't matter what Pam Grier and Arthur Marks say. I've seen one now. And when I watched this movie, it had everything that I ever imagined would be in a blaxploitation movie.
Oh, yeah.
Everything.
Yeah, everything, including the cast. All these actors that show up again and again in these movies. Like,
the cast is incredible.
Oh my God, this is one of the best casts of any movie you'll ever see. Yaphet Kotto is in it, and he came to play. This guy, and Pam Grier too. There's a hilarious bit in the interview where she says Roger Corman gave her Stanislavski's book, so she'd never acted before. And Roger Corman has heard of Stanislavski, and he hands it to Pam Grier, and Pam Grier learns how.
Gave her the method. An actor prepares.
I was like, what? What is this? Is this real? Anyway, so Pam Grier is so it's interesting too, because this great book includes reviews of the movie, good and bad, and some of them are like she's awful, and some of them she's great. I couldn't get
open to the very page. I want to talk about these reviews at some point, but go on.
I couldn't get enough of her. I thought she was awesome in this movie. There were some bizarre choices. Like there's one scene where she sees a guy get killed and she slams her hand on the ground like, oh no, instead of like covering her mouth in shock, like things that you would normally expect would be like there were some bits like that. But I mean, and there's a moment where she almost looks right in her first scene where she looks almost right into the camera. I'm like, whoa, okay, this is odd. And the kid brother does too. And the kid brother, I should say, was also like one of my favorite characters in the comic strip. I loved it whenever he showed up, and he's great in the movie too. Yeah, Yaphet Kotto. So this is like 2 years after Live and Let Die, a couple of years before Alien. Midnight Run in the 80s. He can play all sorts of different kind of characters, and he plays this PI, really kind of laid back, but also knows when to stress out. Has a sense of humor. He's so great in it. We get Scatman Crothers is in it again.
He plays a pervy old priest.
A pervy priest 5 years before The Shining. But all these guys had been in, Carl Weathers. We have to talk about Carl Weathers. He's like eighth build, but he's in like half the scenes for the first two-thirds.
Does he have any lines? I don't think he has any lines.
You might be right. But he's yeah.
Oh, he has barely any lines. He's just a kind of menacing figure that's in, but he's in it. He's in the whole film, the whole way through.
Yeah. And Arthur Marx had used him in another movie.
Really. The actual antagonist is a bit boring.
Yeah, that's right.
He's like he's the implacable man. He's like the Terminator.
Yeah, he's a hitman who comes after various people, but especially after the Pam Grier, after Friday. But he's actually really good in it, and this was I think his second movie. And he also did another movie with Arthur Marx, which might be the other one that he did before this one. So the cast was, and I feel like there was there even somebody else that I was forgetting that's in, Eartha Kitt.
Eartha Kitt's in it. She's so great.
She's really over the top, this really over the top fashion designer. I don't understand any of her choices as an actress in this. They were like, just play it like you're really eccentric.
Just be Catwoman.
Yeah.
Catwoman. She's like, she even goes at one point.
She does.
That thing that
she certainly does. Yeah.
It's so good. There's a bit in one of these reviews which is very much of the time. The very end of the review that appears in the Philadelphia Inquirer in 1975, Eartha Kitt, obviously aging and trying to exude the kind of feline sensualness that made her famous, plays an impressive part. So does Godfrey Cambridge, who plays the part of a homosexual.
Right.
That's the end of the review.
That's the end of the review. Yeah.
It's another amazing character. Godfrey Cambridge is club owner who he's so camp.
Yeah. Oh, we should also mention the pimp was played by Ted Lange from The Love Boat. He was the who was he? He was the. Did he work the bar or whatever in The Love Boat? Anyway, so he was in The Love Boat in 77. So that's only 2 years after this. So all of these kind of like people.
He's a pretty tame pimp. He never actually. Does he say he's a pimp? I think.
No, you have to. He's trying to hire Friday into his stable.
He is.
Yep. He wants a relationship with her, but he also wants her to work for him. So he's always coming around and giving gifts. And the kid brother,
the kid brother says he's giving them to Friday, and he sells them.
Oh my God, I love this kid. So the first time we see him, he's hanging out in the closet in their apartment for some reason, and then at one stage we see him in there hiding in there counting money, and we're like, what? What's he doing? And Friday says, "What are you doing there?" And he's like, I don't remember what his answer is, but he kind of brushes it off. But then we find out he's taking all these Chanel No. 5s and all these expensive jewelry and perfumes and stuff from this pimp and selling them, and that's how he's making money. And
Yaphet Kotto says, "Are you hustling?" And he says, "No, strictly black capitalism."
Black capitalism. What a great line! That whole scene, because the kid he's pouring sugar onto his cereal, and he says, and Yaphet Kotto says, "Do you want some sugar with that?" And the kid says, "Nah, too sweet for me." And then he tries to sell Yaphet some of this stuff or whatever, and he's, "What, you're hustling now?" And he says, "No, just black capitalism." I thought, best scene in the movie, really, for me. But yeah, I love this kid, and then he's selling this stuff. And there's a moment where he also almost looks right into the camera when he kind of reveals what his scam is. But yeah, so this guy always shows up with this car of like 4 beautiful women, and then like he has a present for Friday, and she comes downstairs, and he's like, "Let me drive you," and she's like, "Okay, you can drive me, but I'm not going to work for you or be your girlfriend or whatever." Yeah, so we have to remember that Ted Lange was in it. It's a really amazing cast, and a lot of other actors probably that I wouldn't recognize, but they all seem to be busy, like just clicking through IMDb and Wikipedia. It seems like everybody was like a name character actor, at least at the time. And a lot of these people were about to explode, like Ted Lange, and Yaphet Kotto was going to get even bigger. Well, although Live and Let Die was earlier, but he was, Alien was coming up and stuff. So
yeah,
cast is great. I almost never knew what was happening in the movie, plot-wise.
Yeah, the plot, yes. Yes. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so there's a very elaborate...
I think one of the reviews says there's lots of bullet holes in this movie and nowhere more so than the plot.
Yeah,
You know,
there might not be any holes in the plot. It's just that I couldn't understand what was going on.
There might not have been. It's not really clear why people do things, where they're going, why especially.
Right.
People die. Friday knows them. She follows them to she follows them to a friend of theirs, and the friend tells her to go somewhere, and I just didn't really know what was. Yeah.
So the inciting incident
is revealed at the very end.
Right. So the kind of inciting incident is that Friday is hired to go take some pictures of this billionaire, the world's richest black billionaire, who has come back into the United States after a very long time, but somehow he knows that he's coming into the country. She tells her to go to the airport. She goes, but when she arrives, there's an assassination attempt on the guy, which sets up this whole...
By Carl Weathers,
which sets up the whole mystery of who tried to kill him and why, and that's kind of the whole... And then by the end of it, we've got this whole conspiracy to...
Well, that should be the mystery, isn't it? But it seems to be mostly Friday Foster trying to figure out who killed someone she knows, like her girlfriend, and it's only tangentially related to the main plot of the black billionaire disappears after the first scene. I think it's going to be... I mean, if at that point I was like, aha, okay, I see what's happening here. She stumbled on a conspiracy. But then we kind of forget about the conspiracy. And Carl Weathers just seems to be shooting random people.
Yeah, we don't know why he's killing those people. At the end of the movie, I still don't know why he was killing those people. I don't know. And at one point, it was suggested by the senator character that the billionaire, whose name was Tar, I think, Tar had set up his own assassination. He tried to fake his own assassination or something. And then you're like,
those two powerful men suspect one another.
Right.
Friday sleeps with both of them.
She sleeps with a billionaire and a senator, and at the end of the final shot of the movie, she's got one on each arm, and it's like, this is like real, like, liberated a moment. Yeah. I really actually love that bit. I love that she slept with both these guys, the two most powerful guys in the movie, and it was like nobody. At the end, they were all just like a happy family almost.
Yeah.
Yes. But yeah,
she's very independent. Real, like, iconoclast, very, like, a stand-up.
In fact, they say, like...
brash, confident. It's everything I expected a character in a female character in a blaxploitation movie to be.
Yes, and I think she doesn't... Somebody accuses her, maybe it was her boss, the white photographer, accuses her of being, like, she's partying and drinking all the time, which is not what she's like in the comic strip. She's, like... In the movie, she seems to be a real fun lover, but we don't see any of that. He accuses her of it, and she kind of says that's not the case or whatever. But I did want to mention, I love that...
Well, this is...
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, that seems to be as good a time as any to say that there's not a lot of connection between Friday Foster, the comic strip, and Friday Foster, the character in the movie.
It's almost exactly...
would say loosely based.
Yeah. Loosely based, and I think the Sean North character, who's her white boss immediately above her, is her like actual boss in the comic strip. And Longarón,
he's the second protagonist of the comics.
Right.
I mean, Friday Foster's the main protagonist, but he's the second protagonist. He's in all of the adventures. They're partners. They go on all their adventures together. But of course, he's also her boss, and she's his interlocutor for the black community. She takes him through Harlem and shows him, or she's his guide, his native guide to Harlem. So but there's nothing like there are very, very few white characters in the film.
Right. This is exactly where I was getting. So Longarón says in his interview in the book, he says, I didn't like that they made that character so dumb or whatever, so he's kind of stupid in it. I was like, as soon as I started watching this movie, I loved it. I love that he was dumb. And I love that she actually works, they both are working for a magazine publisher who's also a black man. I love that.
Yes. And he's slumming it, right? He's just coasting.
Yes.
He was out partying. and Friday
That's
is
right.
the one that quits her New Year's Eve party and goes and takes the photos of the billionaire getting off the plane.
Yeah.
Great.
And she's the one also like doing most of the camera handling, where it's kind of like she's an assistant in the comic strip, but in the movie she's like a proper photographer. And Pam Grier talks about in an interview. There's kind of a mystique around cameras. An analog camera with all the settings and stuff. And I know because my wife was big into photography as well. It's really like a mystical thing almost, and it really adds to the appeal of the character, and it really elevates the role almost. Just the idea that she knows how to work this very, very complicated, almost like an airplane level of complexity in this piece of equipment.
That's good. Yeah, I can see where you're going with that. I really enjoyed this film. I enjoyed it a lot. I'm so glad I saw it. I'm so glad I can say I've seen a film like this now. It's excellent. I wouldn't go as far. I wouldn't go as far as you've gone saying that it's the best. I know, like that it's brilliant. I have nothing to compare it to. I loved it. I have nothing to compare it to. I haven't seen Superfly. I haven't seen any of these other famous blaxploitation films. Coffee or
Foxy Brown.
Foxy Brown. But I really like this, and I really enjoyed it as my introduction to that world, you might say.
Yeah.
Although I can see, it's pretty rough. Part of the reason I loved it is because it's so rough around the edges.
Sure. Oh yeah, there's some of the direction is very clumsy. Like sometimes you can't tell if people can actually see each other. Like you cut from one character to the other, they're looking at something, but you can't tell if they can she actually see Carl Weathers shooting that guy? Did she witness this, or is she looking somewhere? Yeah. There's a few scenes like that, and like there's some
funny action choices in, say, like the car chases and things like that. There's some funny action direction where the car will rocket through an intersection, and then another car will just sort of trundle into the intersection and then brake.
Yes,
it was meant to be.
Yeah. But why?
It looks a little hokey.
Yeah, and there are plot holes. Like, why does Carl Weathers, the assassin, show up at the funeral of Cloris or whatever her name was? Like, why is he there? So Pam. Yeah. Oh, he tried to assassinate Pam, and then he shows up at the funeral of the one. Like, what are you doing there? That's crazy. There were a few moments.
Godfrey Cambridge's character, the very camp guy from the bar.
Yeah.
He's making a call in a phone booth, and then Carl Weathers is there in a truck.
Yes.
And it's cool. Like he runs like the camp guy hangs up the phone and then turns around and screams into the camera, and then Carl Weathers' truck just slams into the phone booth.
Yeah.
Look, it's a cool scene, but how did Carl Weathers know he was there?
How do you know he was there? Yeah, what was he doing there? And also,
Carl Weathers is like the Terminator. He just shows up.
Yeah, there's a moment where
he runs away from Harley sometimes. Do you remember when he shoots Eartha Kitt?
Yeah.
And then he just legs it. He had all three of them at his mercy. So it's Yaphet Kotto's character, Eartha Kitt's character, and Friday, Foster Friday, Pam Grier's character. They're all in a room together, and Pam Grier's about to spill the beans. She's about to tell them everything.
Yeah.
And then Carl Weathers appears and shoots her.
Yeah, right.
That's what.
Yeah. It's
and then instead of shooting all three of them, he runs. What's he running from?
I don't know, but it made for a great rooftop chase. Like really
so good.
A great rooftop chase with a lot of great stunts where I was very scared for these stuntmen that were jumping from roof to roof.
That was good. I have no issues with that whatsoever. That's a fantastic scene with the running around on the roofs.
Yeah. And there's there's another chase where this cop car scrapes this other car as it's coming around a turn, and the parked car that it scrapes explodes. And I'm like, okay, why? Why did this car explode? I don't know, but it was cool. It was really, I liked.
It was cool.
It was really.
One of the sleazy dudes from the club tries to run over Friday after she leaves the club after trying and failing to persuade Godfrey Cambridge's character to tell her who Black Widow. Do you remember the name? What's the name? Black Widow was. And then she leaves the club and then a guy tries to run her down, and he drives into a light bulb, and then the light bulb electrocutes his car and electrocutes him. Do you remember?
Right,
He drives
yes,
like
yes,
a street
yes,
light
yes.
in a
Yes, that's
tunnel.
right. That's right. Yeah.
It's so goofy.
Yeah.
But cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And why was the church full of guns?
Yes.
Why was Scatman Crothers?
Why did
Church full of, as
jump
soon as
in a
they find out
hearse?
they're under attack, they all pull out all these guns out of the woodwork, literally out of the woodwork, and I'm like, what? How? Why isn't this a church?
Well, that's the climax of the film, where everything's wound, where we find out what it all was, because the film certainly hadn't told us up to that point.
Yeah, and there's
where all the most influential members of the community were meeting at Jericho, which was the name of Scatman Crothers' ranch.
Yeah. Oh, it's just a ranch. It's not a church, right? Okay. It's still full of guns.
Sorry. It's not. But I mean, it's like you say, it's just a room with a bunch of statesmen in it, and the statesmen are all packing.
Yeah. Yeah, and also like there's a bit of a structural problem where there's a great moment where she runs in to tell Crothers about the conspiracy. She's discovered this conspiracy to kill all of the black government leaders that have converged on this meeting. And then it turns out that the ringleader, the senator, is actually there. But it's already been revealed early. It's a great kind of like, oh no, he's right there in the room, and she didn't know it. But we already know that he's not behind it, because we got an earlier scene where the billionaire from Gilligan's Island is revealed to be this white guy that's behind all of this.
That was.
And he's only in that one scene, and then he's got this other black guy who's a character actor I've seen in 100 things. And I went through his IMDb. I couldn't recognize what he was from that I've seen him in. But
he's
anyway,
Charlie. The Charlie something or other, Mr. Charlie, and he's just some functionary. He's like secretary or something, and he's the mastermind. Right,
but they say he's behind it because some brothers will do anything for $1 or whatever is the line given. But what about his hundreds of black henchmen? How did they're all okay with this? It seemed it was very loosey-goosey at the end. And it's
a real rough diamond. I did enjoy it a lot.
Yeah, and at the end, and the climax, I mean, Friday's hiding under a table, and the big climactic fight goes to Yaphet Kotto, who beats up this guy while giving some pretty the weakest lines of the movie. Like, he has great lines throughout the movie.
Terrible lines.
And then finally he has this thing where he's like giving him...
you got to go back to school, and he says, like, 1 + 1 is 2, and punches... Why is he saying that?
Yeah, well, I kind of said 1 + 1 is 2 means 2 fists, and then he was like 4 means 4 fingers. I was kind of making sense of it.
I'm pretty sure he didn't say anything like that. He was just walloping him.
No, he doesn't. But this was my guess. This was what I was guessing, and then it just goes off the rails where he says, like, see spot run, and I'm like, what does that have to do with anything?
That's not anything to do with anything, but it's hilarious. I don't agree. I agree they were weak lines, but I thought that they were. That's just part of the charm of it for me.
Right. Okay.
Because it's just so. I like. Okay, so speaking of that scene, it's a real whirlwind of crazy nonsense. That bit where he punches him and says "see spot run." Pam Grier drives up in a milk float.
Yes. Yes.
The second time she steals stuff in the movie, she steals a hearse in an earlier scene.
Oh my God! There's a hearse chase and there's a milk truck chase. Yeah. Yeah. Great.
Yeah, so great. And she pulls up and all the menacing guys are there with guns. And they say, "What are you doing here?" And she says, "I'm delivering the milk." And then she breaks a milk bottle on his head.
Oh yeah. I love the way she snuck into the airport, like onto the airport, like she gave these kind of lines to the guard. She made up this story, and then when she walks away, she says "turkey" out of earshot. It was the funniest.
That was great.
Bit.
The film started really strong.
Later on. I think the last 5 minutes, when they tried to tie it all together, it kind of fell apart, and the climax wasn't quite right. They wanted a big explosive ending, and they got it, but they kind of had to jump through some awkward hoops to get there. I think overall. So.
Yeah, but there's that rooftop chase scene. There's a great scene which I think was shot pretty well, which is where Carl Weathers meets his demise.
Oh yeah.
He meets his fate. And that's they're having a big fist fight, scrabbling over the gun. It's quite dramatic. The punches are they're obviously fake, but Weathers' character wallops Kotto's one with a board, and then lifts it above his head to bring it down and end the fight. And then Yaphet Kotto's character recovers the gun and shoots him. And then there's this great close-up on Carl Weathers' face. He still doesn't say a word. I think he might not have any lines. He doesn't say a word.
Right.
He just looks like horrified.
Yeah.
And it's just, I sent you the picture. You should probably make it I'm saying it. You should make it the picture for this podcast for this episode.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. But the truth is, Pam Grier is going to get a lot more click-throughs.
Yes, of course it's going to be Pam Grier. Obviously it's going to be. Not Carl Weathers' poleaxed face.
Yeah. I have to say. Also, this is good timing. As we're recording this episode, the BFI is actually having a retrospective on Pam Grier. So,
amazing.
It's kind of good. I don't know when we're actually going to publish this, but it's a good timing as far as that's concerned. Okay, so I think at the end as we wind down each episode, we should say comic yay or nay, movie yay or nay, and then adaptation yay or nay. So let's start with the comic.
Right.
Yay or nay?
It's got to be. It's nay for me.
Okay.
Because it's really just it's very interesting as an historical artifact.
Yeah.
All the circumstances around it being written.
Yeah.
Published. All of that's really interesting, and it's yay for this book that you sent to me, the Friday Foster the Sunday strips. The comic itself, there's nothing really there.
Yeah. I agree with that completely. I'm going to say nay to the comic. I'm going to say if you can't afford the book, if you're not a collector of these sorts of things, at least try to look at some strips online because they're great to look at. You don't really have to read any full storylines or anything like that because you're not going to see anything new that's not in a lot of the other Sunday strips. So yeah, nay for me, nay for the comic. But if you can buy it as an artifact and as historical, like the historical stuff in there is really remarkable.
Really interesting.
Okay, movie, yay or nay?
Oh, that's a yay.
Yeah, yay for me too.
If you haven't seen a blaxploitation movie, this is the movie.
Yeah, in a sense, it's kind of
like.
Yeah. I mean, there's probably 5 or 6 that are. Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Go on.
I'm going to say there's probably 5 or 6 blaxploitation movies you could watch. I haven't seen it. I hadn't seen this one, but it's really, I loved it. I think it holds up. I understand all the negative reviews that are in there at the back. I don't understand how you could say Pam Grier's acting was bad. I mean, she studied under Stanislavski through Roger Corman. I mean, how do you beat that? She's really great. And it's just funny. It's funny through and through, and exciting, and it's great to look at.
This is a cult movie with no cult. I mean, I understand that the reviews are negative at the time because all sorts of fantastic movies get negative reviews.
Oh, look, also think about 75.
A lot of them.
You think about how great the movies coming out of the 70s were. All those giant movies. This was kind of a corner of the industry that was like considered the dregs,
First of all, it's already considered the dregs. Second of all, this isn't probably not the most shining example of this kind of film either. I mean, it's certainly rough around the edges.
Yeah, but
I really enjoyed it.
And going back to Carl Weathers for a second, 2 years after this, he's in Rocky, and he goes to audition for Rocky, and he tells this guy who's a football player that's made 2 movies, goes up to Sylvester Stallone and tells him he's a bad actor at the audition, and that's why he gets hired. So
I didn't know that.
Think about that. That's
he's fine in this.
He's great in this. He's good at what he.
He's one of the better. It's really good. It's really with quiet menace.
And really for Yaphet Kotto, who's just everything he's in, I cannot believe it. He's a different guy every time. He's just great, and it's a really definitely yay for the movie. Okay, how do we feel about it as an adaptation of the comic strip.
And this we say yay or nay to this, or do we just rate it?
No, let's just say yay or nay, and I mean, I'm trying to be as unfair as possible about this and just arbitrarily saying yay or no. I mean,
I'm not sure about the premise of the question. I mean,
I don't
it's
know.
Not a good adaptation of the comic.
So it's a nay. That's a nay.
That's nay. The comic.
But in a sense, you could say yay because they threw out what was crap in the comic and kept what was good, and maybe even improved it. Like they improved in my mind, they improved the white photographer by making less of him.
By making him dumb and getting him out of the movie.
And just having him in 2 scenes and just a write-off character. Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, good adaptations always riff on the source material, don't they? They don't slavishly adapt them.
Yeah.
I don't know. On the other hand, I feel like there's so much. I mean, perhaps there's some rose-tinted glasses with the book, but there's so much high-mindedness. There's so much to celebrate about the Friday Foster comic strip.
Yes.
Where it doesn't seem like there's that much to celebrate about the Friday Foster film.
Okay, you're right. You're right about that. Yeah.
Well,
because the thing is, the movie. No, you're right. Because the movie kind of is just working in the idiom of blaxploitation movies.
Yes.
Because it reminds me of those. For years and years, they were talking about doing a Doctor Strange movie. Or I'll give you another example. So, because Sandman is on TV, for years they were trying to make a Sandman movie, and they were like, the producers were always like, "Can't we make him a superhero?" So, and that's why it didn't get made, because the producers were all like, "How do we make him a superhero, like Superman or Batman?" So, it would be like if you make Sandman, if they made that movie and it was, let's say, an awesome movie, an awesome superhero movie, it would be a nay adaptation because it just plugged it into the most popular genre of the time that it was made. And
I gotcha. I actually think this is a good idea. I can see there's going to be a lot of fruitful kind of like discussion about whether it's yay or nay. Yeah, I see that. No, great idea. Yeah, no, I'm on board.
So maybe there's what do they do on MythBusters? It's confirmed, plausible or disproven, or is that the 3 levels?
Oh my god, I don't remember. It's been so long since I saw it.
Anyway, so maybe we need something in the middle there.
We'll
so
polish this.
I'm gonna, we'll work it out. Wow, as an adaptation, so.
As an adaptation,
you're right. They've taken out too much. You're right. They have taken out too much. So it's going to be nay as an adaptation.
I mean, it works because of that. I think a straightforward adaptation wouldn't it be as fun a movie, as entertaining a movie. But so it's nay, but that's a good thing.